back of the heads of everybody, though.
I only see the back of David's head. Okay, well, welcome. We have a good group. Looks like this should be good. Just housekeeping stuff. We're going to have 3 basic presentations to start with, starting with Dr. Stewart, and then going to Dina, Fulgoni, and then Benedict, who I guess would like to stand for the hour or so. And but we'll in between each one we'll take a brief stand-up stretch, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, come back. I've asked each of them to do somewhere around a half an hour to 45 minutes, so we'll see how that works out. And then we're going to have some lunch, and after lunch, since we're a small enough group, I think we're just going to have our discussion amongst us here. We're not going to break into smaller groups. I thought if we had a lot of people, we would break into smaller groups, but I think we can do a good job of discussing that, and that we're going to kind of play by ear. So let's see, anything else? Questions after each one of the little talks should be kind of general, and we'll go from there. Any other questions to start with here?
You're not going to make us cry, are you?
We're going to try. Not at the beginning. I'm going to ask each one of our presenters to give a little bit of who they are, because those of us who are members of the parish here know Dina pretty well, but we have a couple of people who could get to know other people here. And so I'm going to ask each one of them to give us a little thumbnail of who they are before they start. And this is just for security's sake, I guess. So I'm going to record this one too.
Once you figure it out.
Yeah, I have to find the button on it. Okay, and we're starting up with Dr. Stewart to start with.
I'm going to get a chair.
Yes.
Can I give you a chair?
Right here. This is. Oh.
Okay. Well, thanks for inviting me, and hopefully I can share some information that will be useful to you all, and that you can share with other people that you know, and you can kind of share our knowledge. My name is Cary Stewart. I grew up here. I moved here when I was 10 in Big Bear, and graduated from high school in '85. But after that, it was another 12 years of schooling off the mountains, so I've been gone for a while. Went to Point Loma Nazarene College and then Loma Linda University for an MD, PhD. And Loma Linda was, as you know, Loma Linda is Seventh-day Adventist, so it's not just strictly, physical medicine. They did do spiritual aspect and kind of the whole person type of care, so that was a good experience there too. And then from there I went to UCI, did residency in internal medicine. So my specialty is internal medicine, mainly taking care of adults. But I also specialize in with hospice and palliative medicine, which is it's a specialty of its own. And probably if you're familiar with hospice, it's services for those at the end of life. It's always very hard to have that prognosis or to come up with it accurately. 6 months is what they recommend, but it's often challenging. But we often can step in and provide the care that it's really hard to get in other places. So hospice, it's purely designed for that, significant illnesses where death is imminent. And that's kind of what we're talking about today, because when you're dealing with death, that's a serious loss, and coping with that is difficult. But there's other kinds of loss too, that things I'll be sharing with that also would be appropriate. What I wanted to talk about, as a doctor, we deal with physical manifestations, physiologic symptoms, pain, whatever, shortness of breath, signs and symptoms. Especially, decades ago in the 60s, and that's where I'm going to start with this presentation. At that time, there was a lot of advancement in medicine, and doctors pretty much would dictate how medicine was prescribed to the patient. Patients didn't have much say in it. And they're treated more as an object. Figure out what's wrong, treat it. Can't treat it, then you can't treat it, and move on. During that time in the 60s, there was a psychiatrist, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. You may have heard of her with the 5 stages of dying or grief. during that time she was working at a hospital and was actually looking at death and dying, and she was challenged to put together a team to really research it further or investigate it more. And so what she did is she put together a kind of interdisciplinary group, which means you have doctor, clergy, social worker, different people that provide care for the individual meeting together. And what they did is they interviewed patients in the hospital setting that were there because they had a life-limiting illness and were dealing with the struggles of their impending death. And they interviewed these patients. They also interviewed family members. And during that time, their goal was to try to learn from them, to see, and really that was the start of patient-centered care. And nowadays, there's a big focus on trying to get back to that and provide patient-centered care for doctors and healthcare in general. But she kind of pioneered that, and at the end of this time that she did these interviews and worked with the people, she published a book in 1969, which really has a lot of information that is used in hospice now, in the hospice philosophy, how we care for people. But the main focus was to kind of teach doctors, especially doctors, because back then they were the ones most resistant to this whole thing that she was trying to do. You know, initially when she was trying to get patients to interview, she had, of course, asked the doctor for permission as well as the patient. But most of the doctors didn't want anything to do with it. You know, they didn't understand. You know, we make the decision, we take care of them. So it was really, really difficult for her to get those patients initially. But after they got a couple and did their interview, it wasn't just one interview, it was an interview to kind of learn about the person, let them speak for themselves and share what was on their heart, what was really bothering them, and take that and meet again and follow up with them and see if they can affect the care they're receiving and maybe make changes to improve the care they're getting. And they actually did. It was quite remarkable, the things they learned. And through that whole process, they interviewed about 200 different patients and their family members when they could. And through that process, she noticed recurring themes of how people deal with loss and coping. And that's when she came up with the 5 stages of dying, and she published her book. And the book itself, it's titled On Death and Dying, but the subtitle is What the Dying Have to Teach Doctors, Nurses, Clergy, and Their Own Families. So it's really trying to introduce something that people weren't used to at the time. And even now it's still useful, and most doctors probably could benefit from reading this, or at least hearing more about it, really taking it to heart. So the 5 stages that she recognized, that she kept seeing over and over again, weren't necessarily things that people have to go through in order to accept their disease or their loss, but it's just ways that we tend to cope, just natural ways that, as human beings, that how we deal with this type of grief. And they don't necessarily go in order. The ultimate or last stage is acceptance of the disease process, so that's this 5th stage. But the other stages, the first one initially is denial. And then after denial, the 2nd stage that was identified as anger. Then after anger is bargaining, and then there's depression, and then acceptance. And again, this isn't a sequence. People don't start with one and go to the next and the next and the next. Sometimes they skip, sometimes they go back and have a 2nd episode or 3rd or repeated episodes, or sometimes 2 of these are coming up at the same time as people are dealing with their loss. So I wanted to go over those 5 and share how she recognized them and ultimately how we can intervene. I suppose my presentation this morning is maybe more helpful for the caregivers and those around those that are grieving, so we can understand better how they're grieving and maybe how we can help them. For those that are actually going through grieving, maybe they'll help them recognize that, okay, this is a normal process of what I'm feeling right now. But from my respect and from hospice, we really try to learn from this and then try to identify and help people get through these stages so they can ultimately get to acceptance. So the first one, denial. Denial is almost universally seen on all people. As you can imagine, when you get bad news, the shock that you're feeling, you're going to think, no, this can't be right. And the extreme of that, initially at the beginning, that we'll see sometimes is people will spend thousands of dollars and travel miles and miles to get second opinions and go to specialists, and there's really hard time coming to grips with this diagnosis they just received. And that, that's expected, and obviously you want to make sure that is a correct diagnosis. So there is a time when people go beyond what is, I guess, considered reasonable. Some people have gone so far to, visit maybe a faith healer and believe that they're healed when they weren't. They continued to live in that denial, unfortunately at their detriment, because they were refusing medications or treatments that may have helped them suffer less. Denial, though, does have its purpose, and denial often comes up later on during the grieving process, because when you're being overwhelmed emotionally dealing with your loss, sometimes it's hard to take care of those other things that are still happening in life, those other responsibilities, especially if you don't have the support that you need. And to take care of those other responsibilities, you may not have that energy to do it without denying that you have this illness. So sometimes that denial is just kind of like, okay, I'm going to forget I have this problem, and I'm going to focus on getting this thing done because no one else will do it and it has to be done. Example would be like one of her interviews was a young mother who had children and took care of the house, fed her husband, and now she couldn't do that anymore. And that wasn't acceptable. There's no one else to help to do these things for her, so she was in serious denial and just ignored her disease process and tried to provide those as best she could, but it was at her detriment, unfortunately, and she continued to decline. But through the interview, they recognize that, and so they're able to talk to family members and friends and have people help pitch in, so she finally could accept her disease in the process and alleviate some of her suffering. So it's useful in some places, but also it shouldn't be necessary at all times, and there should be that support to alleviate that. But we allow, and we see this denial very frequently, and it comes up and again. After denial, the other stage that she saw was anger. And it kind of depends on the person, their personality, their upbringing, their responsibilities. And often it could be just an outburst of anger, and it could be due to something inside that they're really struggling with, and they take the anger out on something unrelated to it at all. And in the hospital setting, often, these patients who get mad at everybody and everything. They made the bed wrong, they brought the food, it was cold, whatever. It just didn't matter what was happening around them, they were angry about it. Other times it could be later on in the process, and they just have an outburst of anger, and you might feel offended because it was directed towards you when you're trying to do something to help them. But in reality, it's something deep inside they're struggling with with their condition. The example they had that she highlighted was a middle-aged man who was successful in his business, had a wife and family. He was pretty domineering. He took care of everything at home, took care of the kids. The wife had her responsibilities too, but they all relied on him to make decisions. And at work, the same thing. He made the decisions for everybody. But when he was diagnosed with cancer and was in the hospital, that was all taken away from him. He lost complete control. When he can go to the bathroom, get out of bed, be bathed, get his meals, he lost everything. And that was very difficult for him because of just his life before this occurrence. And so staff members at the hospital really were reluctant to even go into his room because he got upset at everybody. And so it kind of interfered with the care he was getting and the sensitivity that he wasn't receiving. But through these interviews that the doctor and the chaplain had with him, they came to realize what the underlying issue was. And just making some small changes made a world of difference for him and coming to acceptance with his disease. All they had to do was let him decide, when he wanted to get his meals or get bathed, and often he would pick the same time that they were doing it anyways, but at least they gave him the chance to make that decision. And so, a key thing is taking the time to listen to the individual and see what's going on, what they're dealing with, struggling with, because that often is, if you can go and help in that area of their need, it'll lessen the struggle they're having with coping with their disease and help them get through those stages into acceptance. After anger, the third one is bargaining. So bargaining is one of those things, especially in life-threatening illness, that's usually between the patient and God, or higher power that they might be. It's not necessarily something that they are sharing with other people, trying to bargain with the doctor. The doctor's already done everything they can. But usually it's more, God, if you can heal me, I'll serve you, I'll do this or that. But usually we don't necessarily see that manifested publicly. but when they interviewed and talked to people, they realized that was a common thing that people would do in a phase of one of the stages of coping and how they can get through accepting their disease process. But there are other loss where we see bargaining, where there's loss such as a breakup in a relationship or divorce, children who are losing a parent. And they'll bargain, they'll try to bargain, if they'll be a good little boy or girl and keep their room clean, maybe mom or dad will stay. So there's that bargaining that you might see from an outward manifestation. But that's one of those stages that she commonly would see manifested. And the one thing about, I guess it's human nature, once we get an inch, we want a mile, but some people will bargain, and if I can just make it through my son's graduation, and they get there, and that's, okay, now my other son's graduation, and so they keep adding on to it. But I mean, that's expected, and this is a phase. Throughout the whole process, we want to make sure we always have hope, and we don't destroy that for them. And you never know. I mean, we've seen remarkable things. The mental power, or the way our mental attitude can affect our physical well-being is remarkable. And we see it all the time, and it's obvious, I think, to all of us if we think about it. But when people have that goal, and even in hospice, we often try to do that. We try to find out if there's any goals or things that they really want to see. We try to help them get there. But if it is, for example, a graduation or a marriage, that day of the wedding or whatever that happens to be, they're often we see these people just, change. They have energy and they're looking fantastic and getting into there. And so it's remarkable how, giving them that hope that yes, maybe we can get to there. We'll help. We'll do what we can, and just really helps them deal with their disease and get through that episode and really connect with their family. But so trying to help them with that bargaining is good, but it's also a natural process that they have. The fourth stage that she identified frequently is depression. So depression. So depression, that's no surprise. If someone has bad news, I mean, we expect someone to get sad that this is happening to them. And so it's a kind of a reactive process. And even in clinical depression, that's one thing I want to bring up. Comparing the two. Some people get depressed not because of their impending death or loss. Sometimes it's other things, or maybe they can't even identify why they got depressed. But often there is a time that triggered it, and often if there is a loss in the family or your own illness or dependence, and that triggers the depression, feeling sorry. The thing is, everyone's a little different, and we know that, but some people may be more prone to depression than others. Scientifically, we've done research and determined that there's an imbalance in neurotransmitters, and certain medicines can help, maybe push that balance the other direction, get people feeling better. Some people, the way I think of it and describe it to patients I encounter who are dealing with depression, is that if you do the same thing over and over again, just like exercising, if you're doing the same exercise over and over again, you get those muscles really strong, it's really easy to do that. Same thing with your mind. If you're always depressed and thinking, having a depressed mood, your brain gets used to that, and it's making those changes in there that, anything that happens to you now, you're automatically going to default to being depressed about it. Even if it should make someone happy, you think it will, look at another angle and make yourself depressed. So you kind of get in this rut, you get stuck there, and it's hard to get out of it because you've gotten so used to doing it. And this could take months or longer, but once you're there, to get out of it by yourself is not easy. And often it takes influence from another source, be it from God, or sometimes the help of doctors with medications that can adjust, the mood, try to help them get out of that rut. Also takes a lot of counseling to tell people, you gotta try to change the way you're thinking about these things. So depression and loss and grieving can be a little different in that we expect people to be depressed because they're dealing with a significant loss. They may also have, I guess, a way you can tell a difference, which is important for us, so we can recognize if this is, clinical depression that it's going to be difficult for them to get out of versus part of the grieving process. When it's part of the grieving process, their depressed mood kind of comes in waves or is periodic, up and down. When someone's clinically depressed, they're usually stuck in that mode or mood, and they're not really going up and down. There's always exceptions. Anger is often seen in the grieving type of depression. We'll have episodes, outbursts of anger. You don't necessarily see that in clinical depression. You don't see as much anger. Area of depression, they respond to support and someone being with them, helping them. In clinical depression, just getting the support of people around them doesn't necessarily help, doesn't get them out of it. And then in also clinical depression, they're more preoccupied with their self. And then in the grieving process, it's not necessarily themselves. I mean, it depends on who it is. If it's a family member, they're preoccupied with the person dying, or they're preoccupied with their disease. So there's just some of the differences between the clinical depression, where they may need a little bit more help, and the grieving depression, where it's a stage that they're going through as they're coming to acceptance. The final stage is acceptance. So that doesn't mean someone's happy about what they have. It just means that they're kind of coming to peace with what they're dealing with. And once someone's kind of reached that stage, they still might have episodes where they'll have another flare of anger or depression or denial. So it's not uncommon for there to see stages pop up again. But what I noticed in all the interviews that she did and the stories she relayed during this time in the 60s, is that those people who reached acceptance sooner seem to have a faith in God. That seemed to be a big part of it. And it's remarkable how many times you see them talking about their faith in God and salvation through Jesus. So that definitely, it doesn't surprise me that that's going to help people come to terms with what they're dealing with and not be as scared of the end of life. Hearing all these things and seeing these stories that she identified through these interviews, the thing that we learn as doctors is that being able to address the individual's underlying struggles can really affect how they deal with their condition and their grieving process. And so some of the things that are highlighted as a caregiver, a family member, a friend, a clinician, a doctor, what we can do to help someone get through their grieving process. The biggest thing is listening. Just sitting and listening to them. Not projecting your own fears or needs or beliefs, but just sitting there, letting them talk, and just being a good listener. Especially when it comes to that last stage of acceptance, often people are starting to withdraw. They're being more quiet. They may not want as many visitors. Things are also shutting down in their body as well, most likely, and they're sleeping more, eating less. And sometimes people take it personally. They don't want to see the friends anymore. That's just because they're kind of letting go of this world and getting ready to move on. And sometimes it's not the talking back and forth at that time. It's just being there, holding the hand, just sitting there. But always listening is real important. And then being honest with them. We don't want to destroy all hope by being, too honest, saying, "Oh, there's no way you're going to survive this." But being honest and respect that, telling them, being honest that they do have a life-threatening disease, because a lot of times they wouldn't tell them, or they'd be afraid to tell them that it'd be too much. Or there's one story where the husband had a cancer, and the doctor told the wife, and then separately, and then told the husband separately. So they both knew, but they never talked about it, and they were afraid to talk about it because they didn't know the other one knew about it, and they don't want to cause problems or emotional distress. So every time they saw each other, they just put on a show and try to talk about other stuff, help each other. And eventually when they did the interview and talked to the husband, and then they found the wife and talked to her, they realized they both knew but weren't sharing it with each other. And once they broke down that wall between the two, it just totally changed the whole environment. They were able to deal with issues and help each other, and really helped with the acceptance. So being honest, making sure everyone knows what's really happening, and it gives them the opportunity to address it too. If they're kept out of the loop and don't know what's going on, things, they won't be able to deal with things that need to be dealt with in order for them to accept the disease process. And eventually most people realize that something serious is going on, and their death is coming, but to hold that off to the very end is a disservice. Another thing to keep in mind when you're trying to help someone is make sure you examine your own attitude. The more you're able to think about death and deal with it on your own, to lessen your anxiety or apprehensions and talk to them, the easier it will be to communicate with them and listen to them without projecting your own anxiety or issues. We also need to listen for cues for them, try to listen to see, what's maybe a recurring theme for them or issue that they're having, to see if we'll be able to come back and help them or find someone who can help them. We also need to keep it simple. It's kind of obvious. We need to also keep it private and personal. And finally, you need to be able to communicate empathy. Just let them know that you're supporting them emotionally and physically. And just being there, that's the biggest thing. Like I said, probably the subtitle here, what the dying have to teach doctors, was, that's really, towards the end of their interviews and meeting with the people, all the doctors, the staff, they designed an actual interview room with a one-way mirror that they got like 50 or more people observe the interviews. And doctors were starting to go, nurses were going, clinicians, therapists were seeing how these people were acting. It really made a difference for them. And recognizing what their issues were and how they can better address it to help them accept their disease process. So as a physician and in hospice care, we try to also listen and be there and be supportive and try to address the whole person, not just physically what's going on or what symptom they have, but to really listen to them, let them go through those stages. We can't force them to go through it to think we're going to help them, but to recognize when we see these occurring that that's natural, but also help them try to get through those stages so they can get to acceptance. And by listening to them and helping them where they need it is how we can do that. So that's my presentation from a doctor's standpoint, and from hospice, and just really treating the patient individually and listening to them. Are there any general questions?
First of all, I'm in the process of reading this book myself, and I have to compliment you on the way you summarized the main points. It was excellently presented, and it's certainly helping me accept the stages of dying and understand how I wasn't able to do so before with the people that I lost in my family. So it's an excellent book. I would recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, like I said earlier, it is basically a foundation for hospice care. I mean, I think all hospices should really be utilizing this to make a difference.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, George.
How about guilt? Sometimes you have guilt when somebody dies. Like when my mother passed away, she and I had words before she died. And we went out that evening. My wife and I left the kids to take care of my mother. When we got home, she had passed. And I felt very guilty about having words with her and not being there when she passed. Is that a normal reaction to have?
Yes, we see, from my experience, we see guilt. Sometimes it's, I should have done something sooner, like the surviving family members. Maybe we could have done something sooner, or maybe they're always thinking of something else that we could have done in retrospect. But it's, from my standpoint, that life's not perfect. As we're going through our challenges, we're all dealing with our own issues, and we all make mistakes. But I try to assure people, that's why you have a support system, other people around to help make sure everything is being done that needs to be done. Guilt, it is a common thing. We try, or at least I try, to let people know, what happened wasn't their fault. These things happen. Even if you had done this or that, it could have been some totally different outcome. We try to, the things that we see that are really, I call it blessing in hospice, is where we try to get the families back to meet again. And often we'll see kind of a rally in the person who is dying, that also they'll have a burst of energy and awake and talking, and family will come around them and spend some time. It's almost like their second wind to say goodbyes. And that often will help family members dealing with it. Then shortly after that, individual passes. I see that very frequently. But guilt is very common. I wish I could had an answer to help get rid of the guilt, but that's, it's something we see. Maybe someone else can elaborate on that further. But
May I make a comment? May I respond to what George just said? As I've told a few people here this morning, I lost my mother a year and a half ago, and it seems like 5 minutes ago. She was my life. She was my everything. And I was her best boy. I mean, we just hit it off from a very early age. And I was her sole caregiver, although I have 4 brothers who were never to be found. And there were a couple of times in caring for her that I raised my voice to her, and just got, overwhelmed and overstressed, and no support system. I had no support system at all. I was totally alone. And I knew God was on my side and he was watching over both of us, but I had no, physical, mortal support. And so sometimes I'd go to the kitchen and wash dishes and just cuss like a trucker. I mean, I'm so ashamed of that. But George, what I did after my mom passed was I would just talk to her spirit and just say, Mama, you know that that's not what we were about. You know that that's not how I really felt. That it was just too much for me. I had to learn to deal with this moment by moment, being responsible for the life of my mother, basically. And just ask for her forgiveness, directly to her spirit. I don't know if I'm just learning the Bible. I just started reading the Bible. And it's amazing because my grandfather was a Baptist minister. And I'm 51 years old, and I just started reading the Bible in April. And but I read it every day, without fail. And I have a study Bible, so I can get study text underneath the scriptures and understand it better. And I don't know if this is biblical or against biblical teaching, but I do it because I feel like God blesses it. He allows my mom's spirit to be near me and to be able to talk to her. And actually, when I read the Bible, I read it to her. So George, I just talk directly to my mom's spirit and say, you know that I love, worship, and adored you all my life, and I was just overwhelmed, and it was just a bad moment. So that helped a lot.
it brings up something we often see is the caregivers, the burden they're bearing. And if they're not taking breaks, they won't be there when they're needed the most sometimes.
When you're the sole caregiver and you have no support, even from the hospice company, they would send a counselor, and she was mostly not available. She'd come maybe once every 2 months for 15 minutes. Not much help. It was a daily thing, why is this happening? What do I do next? Well, who do I need to call? I need to make to-do lists and make sure she's here on time to bathe her at this time. Yeah. Oh, it's overwhelming.
Caregivers need to take breaks. And I think one thing they did also show is if you ask the person you're caring for, they want you to take a break too. They still want you to live your life and do things. I'm not saying to ignore them, but maybe it's just one night a week just to get out and do something. And hopefully, hospice isn't there to replace everything. They're not there 24/7, but they should be able to provide sometimes just a volunteer to sit there, to be the companion and let you go out and do stuff. But just as a community, we need to be there for people too, just to let them get out, to get things done and not be stressed.
That's a good idea for service in God's kingdom for me. That's what I'm looking for. Is to sit with their loved one maybe and let them go to the movies or something. That's great. That's a great idea.
Okay. We'll, Dr. Stewart he's off of his section here. And I do want to put enough breaks in this so that we get a chance to stand up, stretch, get a drink of water, go to the bathroom. So we're going to take 5 minutes, don't take more than 5 minutes. I don't want to have to ring the bell to bring everybody back. But take a little short break, and then we'll go from there. So, break. We're gonna have a long social hour anyway, but I know this group, I'm gonna have to use a whip on you.
Promise?
Yeah.
I think the bell will be enough.
Yeah, it's all his fault.
All my fault.
Okay, well, as you can see, we're already, this is bringing up some stuff that people need to bring up. And so that's the whole point of the thing, is that there's going to be some stuff to bring up. We have loss forever. We have all kinds of loss. I was thinking about loss just in general. And we have to learn to deal with loss from day one. When we're a newborn baby and mom sets us in our crib and leaves, we've got loss. Immediately, there's loss. And it just goes from there. And so we deal with all those little things all of the time. And I want to thank Dr. Stewart for getting us started on this with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I have to mention that when I went to St. Luke's Monrovia many years ago, we actually had Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross come and give this kind of a presentation for the church there in the late 70s. And so she's really got things going in a different direction, and it's been good since then, I think. But I'm going to give it to Dina and let her go from here. And we expect, of course, great things. So.
Hey, Dina.
Hey, Dina.
And give us a little, your background, too.
Okay. My name's Dina Fulgoni. I began my career as a counselor. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in psychology. I got my bachelor's degree from Azusa Pacific University and my master's degree from Cal State LA. I then went from there to study addiction counseling, and I got a certificate in addiction studies, and I spent years as an addiction counselor. From there, I came up to Big Bear, and for some reason, I don't know what, it must have been God, I decided I wanted to become ordained. And I went to seminary, and I have a Master of Divinity, and I'm in the process of becoming an ordained deacon, and that's up and coming, and I'm hoping that will be soon. And so I have a Master of Divinity, and I'm in the process, and now I'm working on that. And so that's my background. And today I want to talk to you about dreams.
Dreams?
Dreams. Not going to sleep dreams, but about dreams that we have. Dreams that we all have.
Would that be visions?
Not so much visions, but dreams of
Aspirations.
Aspirations, yes. Things that we have. Things that we have, like I have a dream that I want to be ordained. That's one of my dreams. We all have dreams. Think about in your life you have a dream. Like I know you have a dream that you want to get your master's degree, right? That's one of your dreams. Can you think? Give me some of your dreams. What are some of your dreams?
I've always wanted to make support myself with my art. So
Okay, that's one of your dreams. Someone else. What are some of your dreams?
I've achieved most of mine.
Have you?
Wow.
Wow.
What's your secret?
Simple and small.
You could write
Well,
it.
good for you. How about you, Russell? What are some of your dreams?
Having that $2 million house on the lake.
No.
Not the lake. I'd like to open a retreat center.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's
Well, that would be
wonderful.
nice.
Have any of you had to give up any of your dreams due to loss?
Very nice.
Yes.
Have you? Yeah. Like, what's an example?
Well, I had a wonderful career. And,
Uh-huh.
a couple times that I was let go from positions I loved, almost to no fault of my own. So that was a great loss. And I think the last one was basically, I was working for a real estate company, teaching real estate. But then they had the downturn in the economy, and so they were reducing staff, and I was let go.
Yeah.
It was something I really enjoyed, helping people get their real estate license. So I felt that I was really helping others, but all that ended, even though I was the oldest one in that department, and I think that I had more to offer, but again, I was getting paid more than the others because of my experience and age.
So because of your age, you had to give up a dream.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's really hard. That's really hard. Yeah.
I have a big dream, Dina. It's about the Society of Mary.
Uh-huh.
And I'd like to see that really grow into something quite big and try to feed as many people as we can. That's a burden on my heart,
Uh-huh.
that I really want to do that. And I think of Our Lady, and I think she wants that. I know our Lord, he said, feed my sheep.
Right.
And I really want to accomplish that with the help of the Society of Mary. But not just me alone, but I
Right.
think the whole parish, St. Columba's Parish, plus the Society of Mary should, that's my dream, should work toward that end,
Feeding the hungry.
feeding the hungry.
Yeah.
That's, and here in Big Bear, I have found so many needy families,
Yeah.
so many.
And that's a dream.
Yeah, and that's my dream.
That's my dream too.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have the same dream.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. God
Yeah.
bless you.
And we do have dreams. And dreams are really important. And sometimes because of loss, because of sickness, because of illness, because of divorce, because of things that happen, we lose our dreams. I know, and George told me about a woman in the ordination process for the diaconate who was becoming a deacon, who didn't become a deacon because she got Lou Gehrig's disease. And she had to go through the loss and the pain of not becoming a deacon and dying because she had to give up her dream of becoming a deacon and becoming anything, just dying. She lost. It was a very tragic thing, and I remember when you told me and how touched I was by that story about how much pain can come and illness can bring to someone. And I know of another story. A friend of mine who's getting a divorce, he had spent, he's married, and he's getting a divorce. And he had this wonderful dream that he was gonna be married to this woman, and he has 2 children. And that his dream was that they were gonna grow old together. And that they were gonna raise their 2 kids, and they were gonna move to Texas. And she was gonna get a job there, and he was gonna get a job, and he was writing a book, and they were gonna live together, and they were gonna grow old, and they were gonna have a lovely time. Then she ended up cheating on him. And then she decides she doesn't want to be married to him anymore, and she starts giving him 4-letter words and saying all this stuff to him, and she hangs up on him. And because of that, she no longer wants to be with him. And so he has to deal with the loss of his dream. And so death is not the only thing that gives us loss. There's so much loss in the world. And dreams are what we lose when we have our loss. And so I want to talk for a few minutes, and all of you have dreams. And so when you've lost somebody, or when you lose somebody, or when you when you become ill, or when you have a divorce, or when something happens, or when somebody relapses. I know For instance, my sister, when she died, there was a loss there. There was a loss of a dream. I had wanted my sister always, you know, to grow old. We were going to grow old together, and she was going to move in with me. And that was a loss, the loss of a dream that we were going to live together. And when she died of an overdose of drugs, I had lost a dream. It wasn't just losing my sister, but I lost the dream that we were going to grow old together. So there was a loss of a dream. So I want to open it up to you guys. So what are some of the dreams that you lost, whether it's from illness or from death or from anything? What kind of losses of dreams have you had?
Well, one thing, it kind of is very similar to the example that you used, and the loss through divorce.
Uh-huh.
And I was married to this wonderful woman, loved her very much, and had 2 children. And we got divorced. And it was a loss, not of just the wife, who I loved very much, but the fact that I lost all those many years of my children growing up.
Mm-hmm.
That I wasn't there for their first dates, learning how to drive a car, little things like
Right.
that. But I was able to walk them both down the aisle when they got married.
Oh, that's good.
But now they both live on the East Coast, and so that's a loss. I also have 2 grandsons, but not being able to see them the way it would have been had I been married and actually grew up with them.
Right.
And also, there's almost the loss of the fact that even though my ex-wife being married several other times, she's finally with a fellow who I think makes her happy, and he's part of an extremely large family. So when I see on Facebook her picture and my 2 girls with this other huge family, there's that big loss that I feel.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, since no one else is jumping in, may I?
Sure.
I was just sitting here, contemplating what you're saying. I don't know that I've lost dreams so much as my dreams have changed
Mm-hmm.
since my mom's death. And I've gotten new ones
Mm-hmm.
because I've become a new person.
Mm-hmm.
As she was leaving me, her body was dying, was deteriorating. Simultaneously, I was becoming closer to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're best buddies. And because I know I can't make it in this life without him.
Mm-hmm.
And without talking with him every day. And part of my new life is reading the Bible for the first time, which I still can't believe myself. But I feel so ignorant when it comes to the teachings of the Bible, and a lot of it's kind of scary. But then I realized my mom years ago bought me this beautiful study Bible, and it helps me to better understand what I'm reading, because a lot of it seems not just a little scary, but some of it, I've always heard how Jesus is very loving, and a lot of the scriptures, he's very firm. And so that's been a revelation to me. But as far as the dreams, I've told God over and over, I'd rather asked him, what do you want me to do? Because all I want to do is serve your kingdom. I just want to be here for you. I want to be your warrior, your servant. I don't have my mom anymore to take care of, and nurse her back from heart attacks and diabetes and etc. and I never took the time to have a family of my own. So it's God and myself, and I'm thinking maybe Dr. Stewart planted a little mustard seed, or rather God did through his words. I had never thought of that before. Being there for people who were sort of never there for me.
Mm-hmm.
Being there to take care of their loved one, just if it means sitting with them, holding their hand or reading to them, or just being there to make sure that they're getting food and water and have companionship while the caregiver goes out. I had never thought about that. I'd always known
That's
that
really a nice thing. That would be a really nice thing to do.
you know, since my mom passed, I realized I didn't get enough of her. And we were together probably almost every minute of my life, except for school. I worshipped that woman. She was everything to me. I didn't get enough of her. So I sort of felt like I wanted to help seniors in convalescent homes and hospitals. Empty catheters, you know, empty the commode for them and fetch water, whatever. So I like that idea. But so far there hasn't been an open door or open window for me to be able to even start these dreams. And that's what I keep praying for every day.
To start the dreams. Yeah. So you haven't really had any dreams?
Oh, I've had dreams, yeah. When Mom was alive, I wanted to provide her a beautiful home. Because that was important to her. And I failed miserably in real estate because I didn't have the backup capital to keep things going. But my dreams are very, very different now. I just want to serve God's kingdom. I just want to help people.
That's really nice.
And by the way, George,
Yeah.
I am the recipient of one of your food bank for the moment. So I thank you.
Oh.
Alan?
Well, I really thought that at a point in my life when I was a substance abuse counselor, I was a certified addiction treatment counselor, that was what God brought me to this planet to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely was a deep passion of mine. More than a dream, it was a passion. And I thought that I was going to continue in that forever, right? And then that's what I was put on this planet for. And then of course what ended up happening is I got let go because I squealed on the agency because they were ripping off the county. And so
Good for you.
they didn't like the fact that I squealed and they fired me.
Right.
Okay. And so that went that dream. Because I mean, not that I didn't know that there was a possible consequence for what I was going to do,
Right.
but I felt I had to do what was honest, and so there was a transition there that was extremely uncomfortable. That I went through that dream, and later on finding out that I was able to use those talents in the career that followed. But it's sort of strange because the dream was crushed, but it sort of revived itself, you know.
I know in our support group, we love you.
Thanks. Thanks.
You know, you bring something to that group that we tend to be emotional, and you bring sort of structure and say, well, why did you do that? Well, why did you feel this way? And it helps a lot.
The one thing that I want to mention about Alan's dream, because even though he wasn't able to continue with his substance abuse counseling, now he's involved in a business where he counsels individuals who want to start their home-based business.
Right.
And just seeing the way that he works with these people, usually on the phone, I mean, he's exceptional at it. So I'm just wonderful and thankful that he's able to continue this dream he's had.
So you were able to transition your dream. You lost a dream, but you were able to transition it to another dream.
Right, and it took a while for me to go ahead and realize that the dream wasn't really gone.
Uh-huh.
It had just went on, morphed. There's a
Yeah.
good word.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
good. Did you want to say something? Okay. Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm in the morphing phase.
Well, a mind dream that has never gone away. It's just found different ways to express itself.
Well, that's good. When a dream
It's
can
like
do
the-
that. Yeah.
Like the mail order I showed you guys earlier this morning.
Uh-huh.
It's still going on. It's not making money at the moment, but it's still out. It's still doing stuff.
Yeah, that can happen. That can happen. When we lose one dream, it can transfer itself into another dream. And that's really the power of God at work in our lives. When one dream sort of dies, God can make it move into another dream. And so that's the idea that God is still there in our lives and that God hasn't abandoned us. Because this is, for the most part, a Christian group, and I can say this, that God is very present in our grief. And that when people die, we believe in the resurrection. We believe that when Jesus died, he didn't just die. He rose again 3 days later. And that there is new life after death. So grief, and there is grief. We do have grief, but there is also resurrection. And so when our dreams die, God is there, God is present with our dreams, and God makes new life come into those dreams and makes new things happen. And so when we are talking to those people who died, we are not just talking into outer space. We're not just talking to people, when we're talking to someone who died, we're not just talking wildly into nothing. Like people say, oh, you're just talking into nothing. We believe that we are truly talking to people who live on. Because as Jesus said, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the God of the living, not of the dead. And that's something that's very important for us to remember when we remember this. So I just want to end it with that and say that we worship the God of the living and not the dead. So our dreams are not dead. Our dreams are from God. And God is the God of the living and not the dead. Thank you.
If you would allow me, I feel really strong pulling on my heart to share this. And no need to ask anybody or have anybody share it, but I just want to put this out. Is my worst moments of just sometimes turning into anger toward God, and then I sort of back off of that.
Oh, that's okay.
Why did you take my mother? Why didn't you just take us together? I can't take this anymore. And a couple of times I've thought of, doing his job for him, and hopefully ending up with my mom and him. And I thought, this is not going to work out. I don't want to do this anyway. And daring to ask for his comfort. And all of a sudden, this upset, this just raging, grief and sadness, and where is my mom? All of a sudden, I physically feel this manifestation of,
Yeah.
and I know that is from the Holy Spirit. I know it. I know that I know it. So if we just ask for it, I think.
I feel there's a master plan for all of us, and someday we'll see what that plan is. But on those days, right now, that he's dealing with, you don't know what that plan is until you see it later on, and hopefully, it'll make better sense.
Right.
In the last 2 seconds of your life.
It's for divine timing.
Oh, yeah.
Divine timing, we're done.
You're done.
We're
Okay.
done. Thank you.
Good. Divine timing. Okay, another short break. I didn't see all most of this, so.
Okay.
Short break. Short break. I'm all passed out. I'm a good taskmaster. It's like, okay, we're moving on.
Good job.
Okay, on to the third part. Benedict will go for our third section of this, and after this, then we get the extended break. Then there's food and there's drink, and you can chit-chat for quite a while. And then I plan on us coming back as a group and doing some more discussing. And we don't have, I specifically did not put an ending time for this, so there is no ending time. We probably should end sometime before 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. But there is no ending time. As long as people want to talk, that's fine. I think we're a small enough group that after lunch we can kind of talk as one group rather than splitting into smaller groups. But aside from that, I'm going to give it to Father Benedict, who I hope will give us somewhat of an introduction of who the heck this guy is.
Well, I'm trying to
He's my
find out.
grandpa, what do you mean?
Okay, Richard Preston Reid was born in Denver, Colorado, April the 1st. 1921. So
21? Okay.
Wow.
then went through the usual American educational process and so forth, and wondering, like all of you, what am I going to be? What am I going to do? So forth. And in the meantime, somebody started a war, so I got into that. But that wasn't it. I knew that's just not for me. And then finished my college with the Jesuits, so I can answer any question you might have. And then had this weird idea of going to a monastery, just for a short visit. Month or so, which my parents thought was crazy. And they were right. It was crazy. I don't know where the idea came from, but I went into a Benedictine monastery in the Episcopal Church, St. Gregory's Abbey. But the month stretched on and on and on for 40 years. And I became abbot. One of my dreams was to create this great community that was so loving that people would flock to visit. Well, that dream had to go. So eventually it was time for a new abbot, and I retired and came out to Southern California, where I had natural family members, and the Paulist brethren, who are now in San Diego, took me in and said, well, you can live with us for a while. They had an addiction problem with their founding father. I had an alcoholic father, so we mixed life. Then they moved out of Palm Desert, and I stayed, and I'm now sort of a hermit. Not really, but sort of. I live an ordinary life in a rental apartment, and I meditate, and I counsel, and I have donuts at the corner Swiss donut shop, and meet homeless people and church people, and so forth. And that's my life. And then somewhere along the line, Alan got me hooked up here with St. Columba. And so I've been coming back and forth. Okay, what I want to do very briefly is to knit what you've been hearing all together. What I say is not important. What God says in you while I'm speaking, you want to listen to. It may not connect with what I'm saying. Listen for that inner voice. Secondly, you are doing a little workshop on loss on behalf of a world that is dying. Is that what the news tells you? They're fighting, they're killing, they're polluting. The world is in a huge loss. So what you are exploring today is a map that one day is going to have to occur worldwide. Now that map is already inside you, but I put it on a little card, shorthand, and I'll go through the card, but I welcome questions, experiences, whatever, as we go along. So at the top of the card, we have the major theme for today, which is loss, and our way of human beings to cope with loss is to go into grief. Grief is not our normal human way, but it's the normal way to deal with loss. So you see that human figure there is torn apart. He's not all there. So the top word is loneliness. And what I want to do is explore what God is doing in the loneliness. You see, the whole process of living, losing, dying, resurrection, that's all God. So what we're exploring is, what in the hell is God doing in this pain? If it's just my pain, I'm very lonely. Do you recognize that? And it takes God a lifetime to convince us, you are not alone. That's your interpretation of your life, of your loss. But to take Gina's theme of dreams, supposing God is coming through that window, projecting onto you the divine, but you have an interpretation. You have a dream that's much smaller than what God is projecting, much smaller. So that small dream has to die in order to be enlarged to the full screen of the divine. Now that's the process that you're looking at. When you get honest enough to be conscious of your pain, you're now at God's Bible study. God is saying, I will now teach you, because now you're paying attention. Before you were very busy, before the loss. Now I have your attention. So the loneliness is a doorway, but it's very painful, and you don't walk through that doorway in a day. It takes a lifetime. Does that touch anything? All right, the second word is you're empty. You used to be full of plans, full of vigor, full of life, full of people who loved you. Now you're empty, which seems like death. Huh? Do you begin to sense why Jesus goes into death? To make a way through. And it has to feel very empty. Does that resonate? Loneliness, emptiness. And finally, I don't know where I'm going, what I'm doing, with whom, without whom, I don't know. Aimless. Now, most people in the world, without any faith, You see, take this as a crisis. It's so painful, it's so lonely, it's so empty. I am so worthless and aimless. Why don't I just end it myself? And that little message sometimes drifts into the unconscious, and they do. It might be legal, but it's a kind of suicide. Because they don't understand the divine presence working in those categories. Now you could write other words under the loneliness or the emptiness. Put other words, your own experience. So on the right-hand side, in a vertical design, you see the word identity. That's a very abstract word. It doesn't feel like me, but my identity is me as I understand myself, which is not very accurate. It's what I think of myself, what dreams I have, what gets interrupted when I get this illness, this little me. Now this little me is headed for grandeur, glory, unimaginable. But this little me cannot be convinced by reading a book that that's where it's going. It has to go through the journey, the loss, the pain. The loss of identity as I understand myself, which is not true. God says, you don't know who you are. I am you. You don't know that. You're trying to find God. You're trying to look for God. You're making a big journey. Maybe if you go to India, you'll find God. God says, I'm right here. And there's no separation. Your sins are forgiven. Whatever you do, we do. But my little me doesn't understand that. St. Paul, who's always squeezing huge, vast amounts of information together, says, I live, yet not I. Christ lives in me. There's a lifetime in those few words. And in the not I, that's the pain of the loss. That's the near death. That's the concentration camp that hardly anybody survives. Have I stirred up anything that puzzled you? Okay.
Makes you see things, why you did something, why I did something. 12 years ago, I lost my wife. And when I married her, I took on 4 daughters. So I went from a 2-bedroom house, and this ain't gonna work, so I bought a 4-bedroom house with a pool and jacuzzis for the 4 daughters. And when she died, for 2 years I lived in that house by myself. They just couldn't go to Nana's house. And I go, I know where she loved was Big Bear. I said, I'm coming to Big Bear.
Oh.
So I came here 10 years ago. I knew where she wanted me to be.
You transferred the old house into a dream, a new house, a different place. This is God at work. And this is your identity making a very painful journey, adjustment, adaptation. Oh, taking off your clothes and your skin, right down to the raw me. So that's why identity comes up on the card. It's because how you think of yourself, what you thought you were. I'll give it an Eastern word. It's an illusion. It's the best we can do, but it's an illusion. That doesn't mean it's totally untrue. There's bits and pieces of truth in what I think of myself, but it's not big enough. It's not grand enough. It's not glorious enough. And God says, if I leave you alone, you'll stick with that first house. You'll stick with mother. You'll stick with the old dream. I don't dare leave you there. Now, I don't cause the loss, but I use it. I use everything. So I take you through the loss, the grief, the death of your identity as you understand yourself. And then, slowly, God starts to work the resurrection. So you turn the card over, and the first word, loneliness, begins to become aware of a divine friend. You can't see him, her. There's something emerging inside you that gets stronger and stronger and stronger. It's something like what you thought you were supposed to be and going to be. It's something like that. But it's hidden, it's quiet, it's silent, but it's emerging. So there's the transition. Now, I don't want to suggest this happens overnight. From loneliness to awareness of a divine friend might take a lifetime. And some people never get there. Now, I don't know how God handles this after death. He probably completes the whole process, because I don't think anybody gets cheated. But if you're lucky and you become aware and conscious of your loss and realize this is a doorway into more. So the loneliness gradually evolves into an awareness of a divine friend. What used to be your beloved has expanded. Or, put it another way, God was in the beloved. And God says, now you're ready for more of the beloved. But you would never have got here if I'd left you with the old beloved. So that loneliness gradually evolves. The second word is emptiness. What was so empty is being filled with some mysterious, silent, hidden presence. You get a sense of fullness, which you would never have received if you got stuck in the old dream, in mother.
The 4-bedroom house empty.
See, the old way was good enough for us, but not for God. No, he says, I have more. More. I have come to give you life, life abundant. No, I'm happy right here. Don't change anything. That's what the unborn child says. When the message comes through, you're going to be born. No, I don't want to be born. I'm happy. Food is coming on schedule. It's quiet. I get soft rock and roll music. Don't change anything. God says, you'll like it. Trust me. No. That's the normal reaction to change. So God has to use the brokenness of life, the tragedy, the death, the loss. He has to use all that to take us further down the road. So that emptiness starts to fill up. but it's not filled up with the old dream. It's not another mother that comes into my life. It's not a new house, not the old house. See, God says, we got something better for you, a better dream, a total, intimate, ultimate mother, a bigger mansion. But God has to trick us into this journey because we just can't imagine anything better. Our imagination, right brain, professionals would say, can't imagine what glory is, what abundance is. And the third word, aimless. We gradually begin to pick up a direction with the strength of that inner presence, coaching us, teasing us, prompting us, nudging us, occasionally spanking us. We pick up a direction, but it's not the one I originally had. It's not the one I thought I was going to follow. It's something maybe totally new or different, or it has dimensions far beyond what I thought. You see how God has to be so subtle in coaxing us home to glory. No, I don't think I'm ready for glory today. So that is a process, friends. And the figure on the second half of your card shows you a human being, but burning with an indwelling power of love that can now accept. Last stage of Kubler-Ross's, now I can accept. I've gone through the denial. I've gone through the anger. I've gone through the bargaining. I've gone through the depression. And suddenly, I've come to acceptance. Now, who is doing the accepting? It's not you or me. We're too small and too frightened. Something's coming through the process that is so painful. That divine power is coming through and says, I think you're ready to accept the next stage.
And the gate's open.
Whoa. So all this little card is trying to do is encapsulate your life and to coax you into playing with the moments in your life which seem so filled with tragedy and loss and pain and death. This little card is saying, oh, just turn the card over, turn your life over, turn your mind over, and be patient and play. Play with the mystery. See, God would not dare to give us himself, herself, fully right now because, oh boy, I got God. Now I can do my old dream. Now I can have my old house. I can have my old mother. I would revert back to a small little image of my life as I understood it. So God says, no, I love you too much to give you all that power into that small little imagination. So I have to trick you, coax you, nudge you. Once in a while I bless you with a feeling, an image, an insight. Ooh, I guess I'll keep going. Must be all right to go to church. Mm-hmm. God is the master of drawing us to himself, herself. But he has to do it very gently, very tenderly, very carefully. But he uses everything, especially the loss, the grief, the loneliness, the emptiness, the aimlessness. He has to get us detached from the little I live. No, you don't live fully. Christ lives in me. Now, when you get a glimpse of that, you begin to see what is the purpose of loss. How can I sit with God in the loss? Weep, curse, scream, whatever. Sit with God in the loss, and he will teach you. There's an old saying that God is like a woman. He can stand anything but neglect. Anything but neglect. So you can shout at God, you can curse him, you can run away from him. Don't go to church, don't read the Bible. God says, fine, run it your way as long as you can. But when the loss starts piling up, maybe I'll get your attention. Anyway, you learn to play, see, at the end. Play with your life in God, God in your life, including the loss. Now, you haven't asked any questions.
I have a question.
George.
What about the community of the church, the brotherhood of the church,
Right.
supporting you in this,
Right.
in what you need?
Right. Because you don't understand fully. But
Right.
your neighbor
Right.
has a piece of it. Your other neighbor has a story. Ooh, somebody back there knows a doctor. Oh, we have a new priest. Ooh, bits and pieces come together in community. And you begin to piece yourself back together with other experiences and the divine. And it starts to make more sense. The Bible, the liturgy, the gatherings, the donuts. It all begins to come together. Okay, other questions?
Thank you.
Well,
Again,
thank him, her.
thank you, Lord.
Thank you. This is an attempt at a map, which you can take with you, study it, ponder it, maybe take it into your daily prayer.
On the wall with the other ones.
Because these words are very easy, the experience is very painful. So, yeah.
Well, I think certainly as you become more advanced in your life, advanced in age,
Mhm.
but I think you become more advanced in your way of thinking.
Mm.
And it's through all these losses that you go through that you realize, again, as you said, that God has a higher purpose for you. And it's just like going through all those different stages of my life. I've changed a lot.
Mhm.
I've changed, I think, for the better. I used to be an introvert. I never used to speak out like I do now. And I think that's part of the power of God and what he's done to help me through my
Yep.
entire life.
And now I can't shut him up.
And see, the introvert is one who processes life inside. And what he discovers inside is all of you. We're all the same. The extrovert puts cards, but he doesn't know completely until he listens to the introvert who's done the map. So it's a great adventure, huh? But the pain is still there, but it doesn't attack the identity, your you, your little tiny me. The pain no longer says, I know you think it's a headache, but maybe it's cancer. See how that worry mind will
Right.
exaggerate, develop drama? Okay, friends, I think it's time for the break. And thank you very much.
Okay, and if you give me about, 5 minutes, I'm gonna set up, we got plenty of food for everybody, and then we'll come back in and do a little more talking. What precipitated this bringing everybody together was the fact that recently we've lost a lot of people that we really cared about. With Father Joe, with Elizabeth, with Ruth, with other people in our own specific lives.
Powers.
And Joe Powers, yeah. So we've lost that, and I'm hoping that after the break we can get a little more specific with our own feelings as we want to. And you're not required, but if you want to, that we can do that, and I won't be recording that part. What I do want to do, though, is I want to look at the recording afterwards and try and figure out what the heck you said.
You want to do it again?
I'm going to listen to it again. Just about the time I think I know what he's saying, he's off somewhere else. So it's like, I got to listen to this more than once.
I'm like a mosquito. I don't stay very long in one place.
Okay,
Well,
okay, we'll have food in just a few minutes.
I just wanted to say that I was just so impressed with all three of the speakers.
Oh, yes.
I think they all gave a different perspective based on their experiences.
And hopefully they'll be here to do a little bit of the help of facilitating all of the conversation we might have. And that's the whole idea, is I thought, wow, I've got three totally different. Okay.